Hello, and a huge welcome to another episode of the Transcend and Succeed show. And today I have the honour of hosting a remarkable individual whose journey embodies the very essence of transformation and resilience. My guest today, Savio P. Clemente, is not just a TEDx speaker, but a true warrior in every sense of the word. As a cancer survivor, he has faced the depths of adversity and emerged victorious, igniting a profound passion within him as a board-certified wellness coach to empower others on their path to wellness and success. Savio's story is one of personal transformation, fueled by the flames of his own battle with cancer, and through his best-selling book and impactful work as a media journalist, he has not only shared his insights, but has also collaborated with notable personalities, bringing his message of empowerment and self-discovery to diverse audiences. So without further ado, welcome, Savio.
Dawn, beautiful intro. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We've had quite the journey to get here, haven't we? Do you want to tell or will I?
Yeah, we've tried so many times on using your platform to connect, and somehow it just didn't work. Either there was hiccups, or like, for example, today I didn't see you visually or hear you auditorily. So I feel like we are showing, through example, the audience what resilience really is. It's powering through a situation and still being committed to the goal.
Absolutely true. And it has been about a good 2 months since we've been trying to get together and get this to work, isn't it? It has. It's been nothing has gone smoothly. And even today, we thought we're not going to be beaten. We're not going to be beaten at all. Let's go to Zoom and do it on another platform. And then we're just going to record it and get it out there. So here we go. Welcome, Savio. Eventually, it's lovely to have you.
Thanks, Dawn. It's really a pleasure. And I'm really excited to not only talk about my journey, but to inspire other people on their unique journeys. Because as you know, with life, it throws many things at us. And it's our job to, I believe, to fetch them, to take care of them, and sometimes to release them and let them go.
Yeah. And doesn't life just throw you a whole ton of curveballs every single time? And I found also that it's how you respond to them and not react to them that makes such a difference, isn't it? So do you want to tell us a bit about your story then? What happened to that, that caused you to take control of your own life and lead yourself down this path?
Yeah, let me just backtrack just a little tiny bit. So I was not born in the States. I was born in Mumbai, India. My parents are from Goa, India, which is southwest part of India. I came to the States when I was 3 years old. We settled in a small little town in Westchester County. It's about 40 miles north of New York City. And it was a pretty good upbringing, small little quaint town. I ended up going to elementary Catholic school there for about 8 years. I was an altar boy. Went to high school there, and then I went to the big city, New York City, for college, and I loved it. It was such an eye-opening experience being settled with so many other different types of people in different walks of life. And my track was IT, information systems. I was very good at it. I worked for a lot of .coms back in the 90s. And then somewhere along the way, I realized that life was showing me a different path. And so I settled and organized myself with a few other individuals. We opened up a production company. And over the course of over 10 years, we tried very hard. It just didn't really make that much traction. And then what people really want to know is what happened to me, which was basically in July of 2014. I was on a trip with a friend to Amsterdam, Paris, and London, and I kept getting these night sweats. There was like deep and drenching night sweats. And I just thought, I just talked it up to maybe the environment. Came home, had them again. Very, 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 very deep night sweats. And at that point in my life, I was seeing a naturopath. I used to see him for about 10 years. And he used to analyze my blood, tell me what vitamins to take, what diet structure to eat, things of that nature. And he looked at my blood work and he's like, Savio, I could name 2 or 3 different things. You really need to seek out mainstream medicine. And he suggested I go get a sonogram, which I thought was odd, but I did. Ended up getting a sonogram. They wouldn't let me leave the office for about an hour and a half. And they finally said to me, have a relative come pick you up, because at that point, my stomach was getting distended and I was having belabored breathing. My dad ended up coming and I went to the hospital. Literally within an hour and a half, they admitted me to the 5th floor. And later that same evening, I heard nurses whispering that they were going to transfer me to the 7th floor, which they call the cancer floor. So I had an idea that I had cancer. I didn't know what kind, I didn't know what stage, but it was not looking too good.
Yeah, never a good thing to hear, is it? But I mean, that's obviously been something that's changed your life, hasn't it? Yeah, and I know you talk about loving your inner stranger. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, it's a great segue because when I was transferred to the 7th floor, it was very fast and furious. Literally the next morning, they ended up putting a nephrostomy tube in me in order to distend the liquid that was in my stomach. And at that point, the doctor whispered to me that it was stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But he said that they have a lot of treatments and modalities that they could help. And so I was bedridden for a week when that nephrostomy tube was put in me. And then 8 days later, I was told by the medical director that I need to start my first round of chemo, even though I was hesitant of that. And I tell this story because that's the origin story of the inner stranger. So I did my TEDx talk in October of 2023, a few months ago, in Raleigh, North Carolina. And the stranger for me was that Savio, who was physically dying. I was stage 3, hooked up to all these things, bedridden, but the other parts of me were like so alive. I was like, my mental body, my acumen was there. I was like Googling. I set up Google alerts on my disease. My emotions were still alive. I was like writing and thinking of ideas. I was meditating. My relationship with my friends and family were there. They came visited me. Also, my dreams, they're very vivid and very clear. And in that moment, when the doctor said to me, I need to start my first round of chemo, being someone who didn't even take aspirin, I talked to a really good friend who at that point was probably one of the wisest people I've ever met. And she actually said to me, she goes, are you sure you want to take something as radical as chemo? It kills and ravages everything. And she said, and I said to her, I actually don't know. And at that moment, and I speak to this about my TEDx talk, I tell this story of, when something happens in your life and you get this insight, it's divine insight or guidance or whatever. And a clip from a movie showed up in my mind from the early 90s, and it was starring Keanu Reeves. It was called Little Buddha. He played Little Buddha. He played Siddhartha. And Siddhartha gave up all his worldly possessions, was meditating with 2 other ascetics. They were living on maybe 1 grain of rice per day. And while he was meditating, he overheard 2 individuals on a fishing boat, one older, one younger, and they had an instrument. And the older individual says to the younger person, if you hold the string too tight, it will snap. And if you leave it too slack, it won't play. The path is the middle way. And it was like, I'm like, oh, I can do chemo, but I can also have body autonomy and do the other things. So I did a whole host of integrated modalities from energy medicine to ozone therapy. And that was a choice I decided to do. And fortunately for me, the way it worked was that in about 4.5 months of doing 6 rounds of chemo plus integrated modalities, I was given my remission status 5 days before Christmas that same year. And at this point, it's been 9 years in remission. And for me, that stranger was that part of me that felt shame and vulnerability. And people can't understand that. But when you go through something like that, at least for me, I didn't feel scared that I was going to die because that was a possibility. I felt more afraid that I didn't live to my potential, that I was going to disappoint myself and other people, that I didn't come to finish what I came here to do in this life. And so those were the things that really prompted the TEDx talk and me talking about the stranger. Other people consider the stranger as something that they can't somehow reach, but it's not the critic, it's not the one that's pounding you, but it's more of that true elevated status or that true elevated person you want to become that you just somehow can't reach. Other people describe it, if you're into past lives and karma, as carrying their own past life with them, and that's the stranger. So I kept it nebulous on purpose because I wanted people to think and feel for themselves what that really means.
It's like your inner child. Your inner child is in there screaming, trying to get out and trying to be heard. And I think that to me is what you were talking about. Something that is inside you that you don't really know where it is, but you don't want to wake up after having this type of news and realize that you haven't lived your life, like actually live instead of just surviving.
100%. And other people really call it that potentiality that they somehow can't reach, or even that part of themselves that they thought would never come to fruition because they felt that they weren't good enough or they didn't try hard enough. And like I tell people all the time, what's a stranger? A stranger is a person that you don't know. It could be a foe, obviously, but it could also be a really good friend. You just have to sort of meet it where it is and also discover along the way what the impact and what that story will eventually evolve into.
And help yourself to, get fulfilled and nurtured inside you, because that's where everything is, right? It's not dealt with from the outside, the exterior. You've got to go inside to do it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what then are from your perspective, the essential strategies for building resilience that can endure a lifetime, I suppose, of challenges?
Yeah. So I actually detail this two things. So one of them is something I end my TEDx talk with, which is to know thyself is to heal thyself. And so my TEDx talk is called 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And the 7 minutes is an acronym that I created called the Aloha Reboot. It comes and stems from a healing modality called Huna Healing from Hawaii. And of that, there's an offshoot called Ho'oponopono, which in its barest form is this idea of self-forgiveness and self-compassion. So I coined this acronym called Aloha Reboot in my TEDx talk. And A stands for acknowledge. Acknowledge where you are. Don't try to pretend. Just really accept it and acknowledge it. L stands for listening. So listen to that inner voice. In Huna Healing, they talk about speaking to the different body parts. I call it the three brains, head, heart, and gut, but there's other parts of your body. Now, obviously, you're not going to do this in public where people would think you're strange. You do this in the privacy of your own home or do it wherever you feel comfortable. O stands for, like I mentioned, opening yourself up to self-compassion and self-forgiveness, because I know for myself, I'm very compassionate and understanding of other people. But when I make a mistake, I'm very hard on myself. And so it's really allowing yourself to feel that way. H stands for harnessing. So harness that wisdom that you cultivated. And A stands for acting. So act with purpose. And all that really ties into, at this point, I have a interview series. So I'm a media journalist, as you mentioned, and I've done 7 different interview series. And one of them is Rising to Resilient, how to be resilient during turbulent times. And at this point, I probably have interviewed over 120 individuals on the theme of resilience. And that strategy for me was so easy because it's very short, 7 minutes a day. It's going inward because I truly believe you can't solve a problem without going first in and then out. And you also can't solve a problem, as Einstein perfectly coined, with the same consciousness that created the problem. You have to think differently. And the way to shift differently is that you have to really get into the personal power of yourself. But through the interviews with Rising Through Resilience, a couple of things started bubbling up. It's this idea that obviously everyone thinks that resilience is about bouncing back, and wonderfully it is. But I find that resilience is also about thinking what you're grateful for in the end result. So why are you going to battle through this? Why? Like, I talked to a good friend and she just got her cancer diagnosis. And she said to me, she goes, Savio, I don't know if it's worth it for me to go through all this that you went through. And she goes, I don't really know if I want to. And I could have been really coy with her or agreed with her, which is not the right thing to do. But I said to her, well, at the end of the day, what are you grateful for? And she said, I'm grateful for this. So I said, don't you want to savor that a little bit more? And she goes,
Mhm.
yeah. So I'm like, the choice is yours at that point.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. You just mentioned there 7 minutes. So if can you talk us through what you do in that 7 minutes?
Yeah, so 7 minutes is really obviously get to a quiet state. People like breathing exercise. You do something called box breathing, which is, four inhales in and then five exhales out. I don't really like to give people actual focus on the breathing because then they become focused on just the breathing rather than just breathing. You could do what I love to do, which is a body scan, breathe into the different body parts, start from the top of the head all the way down. You could meditate, right? I'm a meditator. I think that's really what helped me really accept my diagnosis and find ways to try to overcome it. Because I looked at my diagnosis and said, this is my cross to bear. This is my challenge. And I need to focus like a laser beam on the healing. So I let the doctors do what they needed to do. And I did what I needed to do. And I said, if it doesn't work after this, I don't know what to tell you. So you could do yoga. You could just listen to quiet music and just relax. Whatever you need to do to get into that state. And then, like I mentioned, go into the aloha. Very easy. Aloha means hello. So it's the hello to your inner self that you need to give. And just really follow that quickly. And then you could obviously, if you have some time, log the thoughts and sensations that you're feeling. If you want to be in the moment, you could hit record on your smartphone and just record and say out loud what you're seeing and sensing. I do a lot of embodiment work, which basically I use the body as a resource, like I mentioned, the three brains. So it's really about tapping into what your heart's saying, because a lot of people think that the monkey brain, right, the thinking brain is really the one in charge, when a lot of data really suggests that the heart's the one that decides. You buy with emotions, you make decisions with emotions. And a large part of that actual physical emotion that you're feeling is that gut brain, right? There's the brain in the stomach that's actually saying, I should go for it, or maybe I shouldn't, or something doesn't feel right about it. And so it's really just allowing people to just really tap into the way that they feel most comfortable in doing. I grew up in a Catholic faith, where a large portion was prayer. So if prayer is your way to get into that, then that's wonderful. I once had a client who actually mentioned that he realizes for himself that prayer is not about supplication or asking for things. It's about getting in the right frequency, the right mode, the right energy in order to be one in unison with that great power. So.
Yeah, and I talk a lot as well about listening to your body. What does your body tell you? Yeah, logic might be great for making some decisions, but I think more, going from the heart and how you feel about something as to whether you should go ahead with it. To make that decision from internally from your heart rather than from leading with your head, as
Yes.
they say. Hmm.
100%, 100%. And I try to make it very easy for people, because if I talk to them about chakras, they're like, wait, are we doing, and I'm like, no,
And
let's just talk about seven energy centers, the seven energy centers of your body: emotions, mental, physical, astral, vibrational, soul, spiritual. Let's go through those. Let's make it very simple, because I think at the end of the day, people are bombarded with so much information that if you don't make it very, very easy, then they tune out because they're just scrolling, they're doom scrolling on their cell phones.
the body is, it has an innate ability to heal itself if you give it the right conditions. Yeah, mentally what you're digesting, it's not just what you're eating as well. It's about, how you feel inside, your emotions, because they are chemicals in the body that has an impact on your health and well-being as well. So I understand that, you take in those few minutes every morning, which is great to get yourself into that calm state and taking back the power, to aid your own well-being.
Yeah, I deal with a lot of clients. They're like executives and high functioning and aspiring leaders and actual leaders, and at the end of the day, it goes back to the root. The roots of this all is the aspect of wellness. Is wellness more than is wellness really taking away illness? Is wellness more than that? Where is wellness? And that's why my editor really appreciates my point of view, because I've come from illness. I understand the difference between the two. And of course, nowadays there's so many tech gadgets and things that we could do, but at the end of the day, the core elements are always going to be the same: is having some type of devotion or practice or quiet time with yourself, whatever that's meditation or prayer. It's drinking water, having good foods, whole foods. These things are wonderful to explore and to know and to harness, but we really need to take personal responsibility for ourselves. And that's the thing that I want to underscore with a lot of my clients and even myself, is at the end of the day, horrible things can happen to us, but like you said, how we respond to it really
Respond to it.
dictates
Mhm.
dictates the rest of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. My cat's just got in, excuse me. So tell us then about how you use the power of now. Um, how do you use the present moment, to be fully there for yourself to, aid your personal growth and your healing?
Yeah. So as a coach, I practice what I preach. So this is a work in progress for me being present. I'm always looking towards what I want to create and what I want to do. Even though cancer taught me a big lesson because I didn't know, right? I didn't know what the future would hold. So I really the simple things. So having some type of conscious sensation with the breath, because the breath really allows you to become completely present in it.
Yeah.
Another thing is being rooted on the ground, socks off, feet, whether it could be your carpet or it could be hardwood floors or even outside. Just be grounded to some degree of knowledge. And then really the third one is really allowing yourself the time to not be involved in things. So create that break within your schedule in order to just be with yourself. And that's very uncomfortable to a lot of people. But I think the more you get comfortable with just being with yourself or allowing yourself to think and feel rather than responding and always feeling like you have to give an answer or always have to figure out or fix something. And I understand this is hard for individuals who have kids, but if you can carve out that time, 7 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and build off of that, it really helps you become more focused on the present moment. And then, of course, obviously, prayer and meditation are supposed to help you accelerate that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there is no time like the present, as the saying goes, but I mean, truly, I totally understand it. There is only the present moment. There's no past. It's been and gone. The future's not here yet. So it's the only place that you can create. So it makes sense for you to get your mind in the right place and, have those good feelings, so that you can start to create a better future. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, we are going to take a quick commercial break, but stick with us because when we come back, Savio is going to tell us his fun fact. So we will be right back.
Have you ever struggled to recognize your own reflection? At times, each of us must face a road forward through the seemingly impossible. I realized that if I treated my body like a stranger, I could engage in self-reflection. This revelation sparked a fire within me and set me on a mission to leverage my syndicated column and the publication of my book, amplifying the voices of 200 cancer survivors.
and welcome back to the Transcend and Succeed show. And I am here today with Savio P. Clemente, who's telling us all about his story of surviving cancer and resilience. And he has a fun fact for us today. So, Savio.
Yeah, so the fun fact is I've been saving for the last decade for a trip to space. I was a complete fanatic with space when I was a small child. I actually wanted to be an astronaut, and then 1986, when I was really young, the Challenger explosion happened, and that's when I realized, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea, that I could die within seconds. And so I averted that particular career path. But I actually just recently interviewed Matt Mountain, one of the scientists for the James Webb Telescope for a series, and so that was exciting, just getting into the weeds with space. I just think space. The reason why I think it's so fascinating is that I think we've explored a lot on the physical Earth, or at least the majority that we explored, but there's so many wonderful things. And when you look at the images from the James Webb Telescope, they're not renderings, they're not AI. It's
They're
mind-blowingly beautiful, like
fascinating.
cosmic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my fun fact.
I love all that kind of stuff as well. I like looking at the NASA images, on my Instagram and things, and I'm absolutely up for, space travel. It fascinates me as well, so I'm really glad I'm not the only one. So thank you.
Yeah. But when I tell people, they're like, that's really bizarre. But then other people who actually know me well are like, oh no, that's not bizarre at all, because I was actually the guy. Like, so I got my remission status in December, and then a few months later, I decided to do a 2-week fitness retreat in Phuket, Thailand, where they exercise twice a day. And one of the challenges was going up to the Big Buddha, 1.5 miles with your partner with 20-pound kettlebells in the hot sun. And friends of mine were like, only you would survive cancer and then do something. I'm like, yeah, because that's how I roll. So yeah. So
So do you have a time scale then?
you know what? I felt like to myself that this opportunity came, and I was really curious. I've always wanted to do something like this. And I said, well, if I accomplish this, and which I did, thankfully, that it was something that I felt proud that I did. It was something that's not off my list, because I think when you make lists, sometimes you don't really realize the why in the list. You just list it. And so for me, it was just exciting to meet new people from all around the world. I was the only American there. And it was just great to just feel a part of a community, which was really wonderful. And then also for myself, I wanted to get back to physically what cancer did to me. I wanted to get back to some semblance of feeling comfortable in my own physical skin. So that's why I did that
Your
as
own
well.
skin. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. I really
Sure,
appreciate that. So
absolutely.
then how can cultivating open-mindedness and discovering your why, how can that empower your recovery journey?
So why is the same thing people think about purpose. And I often tell people all the time, if you really think about it, and just going back to harkens back to the space thing, is what are we all doing here on this giant rock floating in space amongst other
It's
planets, which we can't really reach that much? And I'm like, maybe collectively there's a larger purpose, right? Maybe it's not an individual purpose. And so I really think when it comes to the why, it doesn't have to be so gigantic. I think everyone wants to make it so gigantic, and people can argue that I have made mine very gigantic doing what I've done. But at the end of the day, I think it's really about really figuring out for yourself, why do you want to get up in the morning? And if you want to just get up in the morning to just be a good parent to your kids, or just knock one thing off the list that you've always wanted to do, then that's great. That's wonderful. It doesn't have to be such a really lofty thing. But for others who do want that, I think you have to really ask yourself, and that was actually one of my training mentors, who says that when you think about gratitude, you have to ask yourself, why are you grateful for what you're listing? Because if you actually ask yourself, for example, I bought this great house, I'm grateful for this house. Well, why? How did this even happen? It gives you another level of savoring it. It gives you another level of understanding. And so it goes really back to the circle of why. Why is it that you want to create these things? Why is it that you want these things? But also, why is it that it's so important to you? And that I think really allows individuals to just dig a little deeper, because I know a lot of people who are just unhappy with what they do for a job, but why does the job have to be the only thing you do with with yourself? And if you don't like it, you can change it.
Yeah, absolutely. And having a job that doesn't feel like a chore, if it's something that you are happy to get out of bed with in the morning and actually go and do it, without feeling like it's a chore, then you're probably in the right line of business.
Yeah,
But if you
100%.
get up every day and it just makes you feel so flat, I mean, why stay there? Think of something else. What would make your heart sing? Follow your bliss, as they say, do something that would make you really happy. It's hard
Yeah,
sometimes given the state of the economy and the fact that you've got to have a job to survive. It's hard. Mhm.
but then sometimes the universe does it for you, or God, or whoever you believe, whatever belief system. Because for me in 2014, with that situation with the other people that I was in business with, it wasn't working. And to be honest with you, Dawn, I didn't have the courage to tell them it wasn't working for me. Things weren't going right with a couple of individuals, but for me, it wasn't going right at all. And so the universe really did it for me in terms of we just
Yeah.
disbanded, and that's what happened. And so I think all that in retrospect, maybe it was by design or not. The fact of the matter is I chose to turn the pain into purpose, and here I am doing the work that I feel called to do.
Yeah, and sometimes the universe doesn't give us a nudge, does it? It gives you a baseball bat to the back of the head
Mhm.
that you've really got to stand up and take notice of. I mean, that was definitely my story with my accident, and it set me on the right path, and I'm going to be forever grateful. I mean, not that I was happy that I was in so much pain, but it set me on the right path, and that is what the universe's job, I suppose you could say, is all about. Is putting you in the right position in the right place to go down the path that you're meant to.
Yeah, and I was on a panel with like a few cancer survivor patients. They're not my I deal with mostly survivors or individuals who face major medical adversity, and they were just given a certain time frame, unfortunately, from where they're going to live. And we talked about this idea of blessing. And I said, I don't know if I would ever categorize my cancer as a blessing, because a lot of friends and family members for me have passed away. So
Yeah.
I understand that it's not that simple, black and white. However, even though I don't know if I would ever consider it a blessing, I do consider it as a revelation. I do consider it as a way that the universe expanded a vision to me that I feel that I'm trying my best to meet.
Yeah, it was its direction. Here's your direction. Yeah, I know. It's as much fun as it wasn't. Yeah, it certainly put you on your feet. And I know that, when we get news like you did, I know people can really overthink. They can be stuck in their head, that they live in their head and they're just overwhelmed, which is understandable. So how can you shift then from overthinking to embracing presence and action in your life?
A large part of my journey with cancer, honestly, as much as my friends and family wanted to help, I felt it was my cross to bear. It was something I needed to do. And so therefore I took it upon myself to figure it out. Of course, my mom helped because I lost about 12 pounds when I came out of the hospital after 15 days. Chemo wipes you out, 5 to 6 hour sessions. My dad wanted to come to the chemo bed, and I'm like, Dad, you staring at me? It's not gonna help me. It's actually gonna make me more self-conscious. But he would pick me up, little things they would do. But and I got this because at this point in my life, I've interviewed 200 cancer survivors. So I have another series called I Survived Cancer. Here is how I did it. Um, of that offshoot of the 200 cancer survivor interviews that I've done, it then became a best-selling book with the same name, where I took 35 of the stories on my own. And when I interview them, some people have some great ideas. One of them actually said friends and family members would come and they would constantly discuss cancer with them. They're like, I don't want to talk about it. But then they brought one or two of them with them to their doctor's appointment so that they felt that they were doing something for them. So they acted as their scribe. So in other words, when the doctor would say, you need to do this, you need that, they would be diligent in writing it down and explaining to the person, this is what's going to happen. So they were there for them in that moment when they needed them the most. So I think that's a really great way to allow other people to support you whenever things don't look too rosy or too great.
Sure. And I think also mindset would play a big part. So from your perspective, suppose how much did you put on your mindset to to achieve your remission?
Yeah, I think I was lucky in the fact that at that moment in 2014, when cancer came to me, I was a long time meditator. I started from 1 minute a day to 20 minutes a day. So at that point, I think over a decade of meditating daily without fail. And so my mindset was really focused on healing. And I turned the chemo into what I called an elixir. So instead of it ravaging the body, I saw it as healing the body, as it being some type of wonderful mana from the universe, juice from the universe, food from the universe. Because I knew for myself, if I saw it, and one of them, to be honest, and I mentioned in my TEDx talk, was this red gelatinous thing called Christine, beautiful name. And I looked at the nurse and I'm like, that's going in me. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh my, it's like this jelly, red jelly thing. So without that, I still said to myself, it's an elixir. It's there to help me and heal me. But beyond that, for individuals listening or individuals watching how do I get my mindset right? List out things for yourself. What's actually happening? I don't care what it is, the fears, the hopes, the dreams, list them all out and figure out for yourself, are those things real? One, are those things that you can tackle in the moment? Two, or are those things that are wishes that you can create later? Because we all want to create and do and be, but in this moment, you're given this particular adversity. You're given this particular problem, this particular crisis. So you need to figure out for yourself and shake up for yourself what is the most things that are bubbling up to the surface, and then allow your mindset through these different tools, breathing, meditating, prayer, how you can figure out those things. And of course, if you can't, get a coach, a therapist, individuals who can help you along the way, or a counselor.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Because asking for help's not a weak thing, is it? I know it's portrayed, if you need help, then, you're not able to do it on your own. But sometimes you need to get help. Sometimes you need somebody that is outside of, your family circle, somebody that doesn't know anything about you. They can actually guide you on your way. That was actually something that helped me in my life and turning my life around. I'm, doing a full 180. So yeah, absolutely. Use whatever resource you can, perfectly fine, absolutely fine. And it's actually, I would say that it's not weak, it's actually courageous. It's being strong to say, right, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here. I need some help. I need to go to somebody like Savio that's been through this, that has the actual experience, therefore the wisdom, the knowing, rather than somebody that's just learned it in a class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I pride myself on, I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it well. So I'm a board
It
certified
will.
wellness coach, past my boards. It's actually given by the NBME, which is the National Board of Medical Examiners. It what gives doctors their MD status. And then I also became an ICF coach, which means nothing for the layman, but for me, I'm like, this is a huge responsibility. I want to make sure not only do I understand where my clients will be, but I actually practice the tools and practice what they do. I mean, even for me, 5 years into my remission status, I had to figure out for myself what's going on. So I attended this wonderful men's work retreat. And at that point, men's work was really getting big because it was part of the Me Too movement, where women were like, no, we're not going to be treated this way. And men had to rise above. And even that experience was eye-opening. We did embodiment exercises, eye gazing with another man, which I've never really done. Just beautiful practices that allow you to become not only vulnerable, but allow you to see the connection in all that is. And it sounds hokey, it sounds woo-woo, but it really isn't. It really is that we are all on some level connected. And however and whichever way that you realize that, the easier you are in relating and being and giving. And at the end of the day, also putting back into the universe, pouring into the universe what was poured out of you. So I had a lot of people help me throughout my journey from start to finish. And I just feel like I want to just pour that back to others as well.
And that's great. And I know you were saying that you were vulnerable. It made you feel a little uncomfortable when you did some of these exercises. I think sometimes that is what really helps you. That vulnerability, that being uncomfortable in your own skin in that moment, actually brings out the inner self and what you actually need. Because quite often, and in my opinion, with my business and my clients, taking them within and asking them some hard questions actually brings up a whole raft of emotions that is needing to be released. So I think it's not something that, you should shy away from. Just go for it, gung ho. I know it doesn't sound comfortable at the time, but trust me, it does a lot of good to you.
Yeah. Well, I think the key there is you have to trust the person on the other side doing that, right? So I create a special container. We understand one another. We're very vulnerable in that moment and in that space. And, there were some examples in even my own work. Is there was a client of mine who we were talking and a flash of insight came and I just asked him, he was a latchkey kid. After school, he would just, watch TV. And I asked him, whoa, what's the most pivotal thing that you watched when you were young? Like, what did you watch? And he goes, that's a strange question. And he had to think. And he's like, and he realized that he lived in the world of commercials. And thus then as an adult became, he was in the ad world. And he realized that in that moment, all he wanted to do was feel comforted and loved and seen. And then he realized now he needs to let that part of him go. He wanted to actually change directions. So it's just, you never know what's going to come out in a session, but the key is using what we are gifted at, which is active listening and actually seeing and hearing and actually feeling and sensing what someone is saying, and actually using our resources and tools and training in order to further allow them to identify that, to compartmentalize that, and to rummage through it. Because as one of my favorite singers from the back 90s, Erykah Badu, would say, she would say, bag lady, didn't someone say you don't have to carry those bags? And at the end of the day, we don't have to carry all those bags.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know some of us, it's gone so bad that we're dragging them behind us for quite some time, aren't we? Before we discover that, yeah, that's not our stuff. We can just leave that behind,
I come from a culture where individuals put stuff on their head. So the bags are on their head. I'm Indian. So I'm like, oh my God, I have so many bags, but I've tried to let many of them go, thankfully.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a constant thing, isn't it? Every day you've got to try and release something. I know
Yes.
we carry so much now, so we do.
Oh.
Yeah, so much. So what would be your advice to somebody then that feels stuck? Either, if they've been diagnosed with a severe illness, or if they're on their journey of self-discovery, what would be your advice to give them?
So if they have some type of medical adversity, it doesn't have to be cancer or something, I would say first, figure out for yourself from a physical standpoint, first of all, get a second opinion if that's what you're comfortable with doing, and figure out for yourself who your care team is. Because someone that I know went and she didn't feel comfortable, and I said, that's not your care team. So first, figure that out. Second of all, ask questions. What is the care that you're suggesting that I do? Third, obviously, do your research. So that's all the physical stuff. Now, the one that I live in is this idea of personal responsibility. So what can you control and what can't you control? So they giving you this diagnosis or saying that this is what you need to do. So figure out for yourself mentally, how are you going to rummage through that and work that out? If you can't, find resources, find tools, find support for that. Emotionally, that's very easy to do. Find some quiet time to really get in touch. If you can't unearth those things, find those other resources as well. But also, at the end of the day, monitor what your brain is doing at night in sleep and dreams, because there's probably some hidden messages there, or maybe there's some fears that you're trying to unearth in that. So that's that. The question regarding what is it, the big question about what should I do with my career or my love life or whatever, is really, I say to them all the time, is what is the most important thing right now that's speaking to you? So I'll give you an example. So in my interview series with cancer survivors, I asked this one pivotal question. If cancer had a message for you, what would that message be? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I want to get it away from me. It's horrible. But maybe that's trying to show you something, or maybe it's trying to point you in a different direction, or maybe it's trying to give you something that you can't really see. So I tell people all the time, this thing this crisis that's happening to you right now, that you feel like you can't move forward in, what is it trying to maybe show you or tell you or bring to your attention? And it doesn't have to be a simple, quick answer. It could just evolve over days, weeks, even months. But the first thing you need to do is take that personal responsibility. I think people are great. I think humans, including myself, because I'm human, we're great at saying this stuff doesn't work, but we're not really good at figuring out why it doesn't work. Like, what's the inner workings that's gone awry? And I think the first thing to do is look within.
Well, absolutely. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about, being comfortable in your body. Listen to what your body's telling you. Because I firmly believe that any imbalance, whether it's mental, emotional, or physical or spiritual, it manifests itself physically because that's what can get our attention. So whatever is going on in the physical body, it's just a knock, knock, knock. Can you hear me, please? Can you just understand that you're getting this symptom because of X, Y, and Z? And for that, you're going to have to go inside. I totally believe that.
Yeah. And a lot of people in different spiritual circles will say it's cause and effect and karma. And that's wonderful. And I think it's great to know how the past maybe created the future or the present. That's wonderful. But at the end of the day, it's really about how we respond to it, right? At the end of the day, you could just live in that and have a personal crisis and not ever make any movement forward, or say to yourself, I did those things. I don't know what the origin story is. I do feel that I need to move forward from these things. I'm sorry for whatever you need to do, forgiveness, self-compassion, whatever you need to do to allow yourself the freedom to move forward.
Yes.
That's what we have to allow ourselves the freedom to move forward.
And that's very well said. I really like that. I might steal that at some point from you, Savio.
No worries. My content is all out there.
It's
At
all
this point,
there.
interviewing, like people say to me all the time, they're like, you've interviewed Venus Williams and Ice-T and Deborah. And I'm like, they're just people, guys. They have problems just like us. And sometimes it's even more magnified than our problems. At the end of the day, we all have to work things out here, and we have to love and not love, and realize and not realize, and unearth and unpack, and all these. It's a very complicated situation, but I do think once you have a semblance of understanding,
Mhm.
you allow yourself the grace to just be.
Yes, and that's it, isn't it? We're too busy worrying about everything that we can't just allow ourselves to be in the present moment. Yeah, yeah, so well said. Totally agree with that. Now I know that, I mean, you talk a lot publicly. You are a TEDx speaker. So from your journey then, how does storytelling contribute to resilience and empowerment? So both personally and, within communities.
Yeah, it's going back to that panel because it was so pivotal. That panel wasn't my audience, but I said to them, I said to one of them, I said, you're given this diagnosis. He's given only a few months to live. I said, if I took a magic wand and took away your cancer, right now it's gone, what would you do? And he named 3 or 4 different things. And I said, okay, from those 3 or 4 different things, can you move the needle a little forward for any of them? He goes, yeah, I could do for a lot. I'm like, so then it's not. I said, there's things called radical remission. There's things, it's not over until it's over. A doctor can only see medically what's happening, but at the end of the day, healing comes from high and low. It doesn't always occur in the medical office or the chemo bed. It occurs in ways, mysterious ways that we don't even know. But the key here is, are you doing something to move forward? So storytelling with that is, and I ended it with this, is you're with a sea of people who have the same cancer as you. Your story is different than others. No one can take away your story. And I live in the world of stories. So my coaching is really about other people understanding where they are, where they want to go, and amplifying their impact by telling their stories, by creating things, whether it's a book or a podcast or in the media. And storytelling is very important because someone can fetch things from your story. And that's what's great about a book, because it sears, at least for me, when I read a book, I'm underlining, highlighting, clipping, bookmarking, because for me, it gets seared into the brain. And then from that
Yeah.
brain, it blossoms into something more beautiful and tangible. So storytelling is very important because it allows us to connect with one another in so many vast ways that, to a large degree, especially now in the world we live in, it's put on the World Wide Web. I mean, it lives for infinity. So,
And one thing about your story is that no one else has got the same story.
100%,
Never. You're completely unique.
100%. And where you are and where you came from and where you are in the present is all part of that larger story.
Yeah, and that's what gives people motivation. If they have a similar issue to, your story, then you can possibly inspire them to actually, rise above that adversity and actually find comfort and find healing in different ways. I think it's amazing to get stories out there. I absolutely do. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. So last question, and how do you maintain a sense of purpose and meaning in life, even in the face of the things that you've faced?
I think it's about understanding for yourself what's the most important thing? So purpose and meaning really boils down to significance, right? Do you feel like those things are important? Are they significant in your life? Do you want to leave the world with some level of significance? That's what true personal power is this idea of feeling I made an impact, but I came here for a reason, that my being here meant something, that you saw me, that you understood me. So I think that's very important to acknowledge that for yourself, because if you can't articulate that to yourself on some level, no one else will be convinced by what you're saying. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing, is having that level of self-love for yourself.
Yeah,
Sure.
very, very important. I have to agree with that wholeheartedly. So, Savio, tell the audience where they can find you.
Sure. So you can find me on my website. So it's Savio, Savio. P is my middle initial, Clemente, Clemente. I have a newsletter, weekly newsletter, where I go into what I call the three brains: head, heart, and gut. And I'm very honest. So I recently covered the red carpet at the Oscars, and I wrote about, do I belong in a sea of Hollywood's elite? I mean, even though I'm press and I was invited and all that, and credentialized. So I'm very honest about what I write. Of course, you can find my coaching. I have a 90-day coaching program. You can find my TEDx talk on that website as well. Other posts and other content that I put out, like articles with celebrities and wellness retreats. I did one in Italy and India with National Geographic. I do a lot of work for them. So beyond that, you can find me there. And then on social media, on every platform, I'm at The Human Resolve. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
I would have put the QR code up, but can't do that just now. So I will put everything in the description of this episode. And I have to say, I'm excited as well, because you're going to be interviewing me. I can't wait. I am so
Yes.
looking forward to it.
I am. I'm interested to peek into the brain of Dawn. Let's see where Dawn gets her inspiration and insights from, and how you do the work that you do. Because, like you mentioned, at the end of the day, we all have pain. And at the end of the day, we all have to find some level of purpose for that pain.
Yeah. And hopefully, because, I almost think sometimes that, if people could spend 30 seconds in my mind, it would freak them right out. But I'm sure, I'm sure that would be the same for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Savio, it has been wonderful. I have had a great conversation with you. Loved every second of it, and I can't believe we actually got to do this eventually.
The stars lined up, and at the end of the day, and this is something that I would love to leave your listeners. It's really how
Yeah,
I echo the end of my talk, which is to know thyself is to heal thyself. But beyond that, at the end of the day, there's always a workaround. There's always a way to get through. There's always hope. Never give up hope. There's always hope.
absolutely. Oh, it's wonderful. I really like that. Thank you, Savio. Much love to you, and I hope to see you again.
Okay, thanks again, Dawn. Take care.
Take care.